Are you hearing all the noise about the ingredients in electrolyte supplements and are looking for a little perspective on the topic? If that sounds like you, you've come to the right video. Hi, I'm Dr. Hampton. I'm a obesity and metabolic health doc, and I'm on a mission to help you achieve metabolic health. And today I've invited my friend and guest, Chris, to talk a little bit about the electrolytes with me. Why? Because Chris has electrolyte products himself because he's one of the founders of Keto Chow. So Chris, thank you for coming. And maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit. So for those who hadn't heard of you, they'll know who you are.
Yeah, so my name's Chris Bair. My wife and I created Keto Chow, which is the original company is kind of a meal shake specifically for a ketogenic diet. But when you're dealing with the ketogenic diet, you tend to need a lot of electrolytes. So electrolytes has been something that's been in our wheelhouse, been in our kind of, I guess, orbit, whatever, for quite some time. And we've had multiple different electrolyte products. We recently came out with a flavored one. Um, my background is actually graphic design and systems administration. So I don't know why I'm talking about nutrition, but for the last 6 or 7 years, my wife and I have been on this. Miriam, by the way, is my wife. We've been on
Yes.
this crash course of learning how consumer packaged goods are made, uh, how ingredients are specified, how to work with what's called co-packers or co-manufacturers. We've been kind of down the rabbit hole, and even though this isn't something that I really sought out, it's not like my core competency. It's kind of become that, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I've got some really interesting insights into ingredients and all that from the standpoint of someone who manufactures a product.
And I appreciate that. And my perspective as a doctor is that sometimes if the ingredients are not known for me, it will affect my patient's blood sugars. Uh, it'll also affect me because I had issues with my gut. So and my wife has type 1 diabetes. And of course, we want to make sure we keep her blood sugars normal. So, and we can talk about even how it affects our kids. If they have things in their products, they may not be as productive citizens as you would expect them to be. So to make sure this is a worthwhile experience for everyone, we want to make the assumption that people do not know much about this ingredient that was added to the um, the electrolyte made by LMNT, and I want to kind of speak to that a little bit. And I just want to let people know we're here to provide perspective, and that's it. And we want to be sure that we provide that, and you then make decisions about what's best for you. So I'm going to share my screen and give a little bit of a presentation because I want to make sure that everybody who is concerned about this topic understands it. Because again, I don't know what anybody knows. I just know that we need to talk about this topic. So the ingredient of concern is maltodextrin, and that ingredient is in pretty much everything. I
A
mean,
lot of stuff,
oh my
yeah.
goodness, right? Salad dressing, things like sports drinks, baked goods, soup, frozen foods,
Hmm.
pasta, on and on it goes, right? So the first thing to think about is that it is there, it's ubiquitous, right? So we shouldn't be that afraid of it because it's all over the place, but we do want to provide perspective. So as we talk together as a team, me and Chris, why is it used, who should avoid it, and its impact on blood sugar and overall health will be kind of the concept. So um, I'm not sure how much you like chemistry, Chris.
That looks like two glucoses stuck together.
It really does.
And I only know that because I was recently on the Maltodextrin Wikipedia page and I recognize that from
That
there.
is so funny. There you go. Even the so-called people in the business have to,
Yeah.
look these things up, and that's why it's important to come to a video like this. And I'm familiar because I had a influencer. His name was Dr. Carmichael back at Xavier in New Orleans. And on a pre-med track, you would either do chemistry pre-med or biology pre-med. And I really didn't have much of a care about it, but he said as a chemistry major, which is what I ended up majoring in, you'll become a problem solver. And his belief was that being a problem solver was more important than just remembering things that in the biology space. So I'm grateful for that, because in my world of healthcare, I do a lot of problem solving. So I just wanted to put that molecule in front of people so they know what it looks like. You know, it's not going to be a quiz at the end, so don't worry about that. But this is someone that I know. This is someone that Chris knows, because we tend to see each other at these low carb conferences, like the Symposium for Metabolic Health. And these are like our heroes, to be honest with you. And Dr. Tro, as you can see, has made an incredible transformation, basically with a low carb keto diet. And he is the one who kind of sparked interest in maltodextrin, because he commented on LMNT's ingredients and basically found out that there was 40 milligrams on the or wherever he found it on the label or elsewhere, but yet later found out that that number was higher, and he kind of was concerned about there being a discrepancy. Now, because of his awareness, he made Dr. Boz aware, and she then put her perspective out on her YouTube channel. Another person we see at conferences, and of course the great Nick Noritz, who's on his way to becoming a doctor, already has a PhD, and he's brilliant and absolutely somebody you guys should follow. So that's kind of what kind of laid the flames, as his image suggests, for us to pay attention. Now, real quick, high level, guys, we're not in biochemistry class. We just want you to know, right? We're not going to go there, Chris.
Okay. You're lost, man.
Okay, right. Chris, you're like, I'm already lost, dude. Now, but anyway, but maltodextrin, as you can see, is a carbohydrate. It's a processed carbohydrate, and you get it from corn, rice, potatoes, etc. But what's interesting, if you look it up, it'll say, and it kind of surprised me, it said it's classified as a complex carbohydrate. I'm like, how could that be? And the reason why that kind of threw me off, because when I was in chemistry class, we pretty much, if it was complex, it's supposed to be digested slowly.
Yeah.
Things like potatoes, asparagus, whole grains, those are complex. So it was kind of weird that it was classified as complex, but at the end of the day, it is digest rapidly, even though it's in that category. And it actually has a nice sweet taste to it as well.
And it even goes further than that.
Yeah.
Your saliva has enzymes in it that break apart the maltodextrin before you even swallow it.
Wow.
That's why it has that slightly sweet taste. If you put pure maltodextrin in your mouth, it'll start off just tasting like nothing really.
Right.
And it will rapidly convert into pure glucose, which isn't as sweet as table sugar, sucrose.
Right.
It is still sweet, and it is still converting into sugar.
I like that. I'll, you know what? It's so funny you bring that up. I did an experiment with my patients who didn't believe that rice was a problem. And again, carbohydrates are like all these tightly held glucose molecules held together, right? And then you break it up with the enzyme that was suggested by Chris. But so I would have them, and it's kind of gross, but I'd say grab some cooked rice and just keep chewing it. Don't swallow it. Just keep chewing it. And even with rice, the same thing happens. Eventually, you'll start to taste the sweet in it. So it's very, your experiment and my patient's experiment is absolutely going to prove to us that is, carbs are sweet, and all carbs in as sugar. But of course, in the manufacturing process, as suggested, number 3, hydrolysis then leads to it being broken down into those small glucose chains, which then taste sweet. Now, this is an important slide, and I definitely want you to comment, Chris, as we kind of walk through these different talking points. But yes, this is why manufacturers like maltodextrin. They like it because it makes the texture stable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It helps with the preservation process. Obviously, they're not going to use anything that's not cost effective. So it's pretty affordable. All those examples we gave earlier, corn, things like that, are affordable. In fact, in Illinois, where I'm sitting, we probably grow too much corn, and you got to do something with it, right? So this is, one of the things they do with it. It's a filler. It prevents caking, and whoever is making powder, they don't want the caking. They want to they want it to dissolve well in the water or the other liquid you put it in. You want it to taste good, and then they have this term encapsulation, which allows it to encapsulate the plant extracts and other ingredients, so it improves its stability and maybe its antioxidant activity. And lastly, here's a nice chemical term, right, Chris? I know, right? Agglomeration. That's real fancy. If you're trying to get a date and you want to impress her, start using terms like that, right? And what that does is help distribute them more uniformly, and it modifies its viscosity. So here's anything else that comes to mind, Chris, when you look at this, or what comes to mind as you look at this crazy list of benefits?
So the coming from my background with food manufacturing, when we first started going down the route with Keto Chow and with SALTT and all that, when we needed to come up with our own flavors, there are companies that all they do all day is you go to them and you say, I need a flavor. Oh, what kind of flavor do you need? I need a watermelon flavor, or I need a strawberry flavor. And they're going to take aromatic compounds, so stuff that has a scent to it, and by scent it also has a flavor, and they're going to take those, mix them together, kind of create a flavor profile. Now, those specific flavor profiles, and we'll probably get into this a bit more later, but I wanted to hit on this. Those specific flavor profiles are kind of considered a trade secret. There's a list of chemical compounds. Some of them occur in nature, so natural flavors. Some of them are synthesized in a lab. You combine different stuff together, you create it new. That's an artificial flavor. Functionally, they're about the same, but those aromatic compounds, there's oils, there's some proteins, those are a liquid. When they manufacture those aromatic compounds, every time, it's going to be a liquid. If you want that liquid to be in something that's a powder, like, say, an electrolyte drink mix, you have to make it into a powder, and it needs to be put onto a carrier agent. So the co-agglomeration, the encapsulation, what we're talking about there. There's a couple different ways you can do that. The most common way, the way that you'll probably hear it talked about the most, is what's called spray drying. You get a rotating drum of stuff, and it's almost always maltodextrin. So it's rotating, it's heated in there, and you are spraying the liquid. So you've got this liquid flavor, and you need to turn it into a powder. So you're going to use, almost always it's going to be maltodextrin. So you do what's generally called, you're generally going to do what's called spray drying. So you have a heated chamber, lots of hot air, there's maltodextrin tumbling around in there, and you spray in the liquid, and it dries onto the maltodextrin. There are alternatives that can be used. We'll get into that probably in a bit later, but the number one that can be used is what's called acacia gum. It's used in the flavoring industry as well. It's an emulsifier and stuff. It's cool stuff, but it's more expensive, and it doesn't work quite as well. And here's the kicker. Why is maltodextrin used? Most co-packers, most flavor companies don't do anything else. They only use maltodextrin to take their liquid flavors and turn it into a powder. They may know that using something like acacia gum is a possibility, or they may not. And if the flavor manufacturer doesn't know that there's an alternative, and the company who is creating the product doesn't know that maltodextrin, that there's an alternative to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who's in charge of formulation doesn't know there's an alternative. And the people doing customer support don't know that there's an alternative. It's kind of this comedy of errors, for lack of a better term, but a lot of people in the industry don't know that there's an alternative. And some of them don't even know that it's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even going beyond, they don't know there's an alternative. A lot of people in the industry don't know that there's a problem with maltodextrin, or if they've heard ruminations that, okay, maltodextrin, okay, maybe we want to avoid using corn maltodextrin. Great,
Mm-hmm.
we'll use tapioca instead. Tapioca maltodextrin is still maltodextrin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just coming from a slightly different source. Now, if your problem with maltodextrin is you may have a corn allergy,
Mm-hmm.
well, then maybe tapioca maltodextrin isn't that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be. So yeah, it's maltodextrin is used because it's cheap, and a lot of times people have no idea there's an alternative.
Wow. That's a very nice add-on to this slide. And it kind of speaks to what this next slide says. I'm sure you may have some comments. But let me just say this. It is gonna potentially raise your blood sugar, right? So if you have diabetes, obviously, if you have insulin resistance, if you're trying to do a low carb diet, you want to kind of know where the carbs are coming from. So it's kind of nice to know where that is going to be. And then you have this issue with cravings. This is something that Dr. Troll in particular would speak to, because when he was on my podcast, we talked a lot about hunger. And one of the reasons why you have hunger is because you have spikes in your blood sugar, raising your insulin. Then the insulin reduces your blood sugar temporarily. Then you get hungry. So it's best to not have hidden sources of spikes that may then lead to cravings, which may be one of the top 5, at least, reasons why people struggle. And then the last talking point is your stomach. And with an irritable bowel that I have, I am extremely sensitive to the things that are in the supplements, the electrolytes. I am a carnivore.
Okay.
And I need to, and when you become a carnivore, you may become even more sensitive because you've cleaned your diet up. So I really want to be cautious about what I put in my body. So obviously those are 3 categories. But when you look at this, Chris, what comes to mind? Anything else that you think about in terms of who should avoid maltodextrin?
Well, the big thing that in this debate about whether or not companies who have maltodextrin in their ingredients should be divulging that information. One of the things that's bandied about is the amount of maltodextrin that we're talking about genuinely is around half a gram.
Yes.
So is that going to significantly raise the blood glucose of a healthy individual? Probably not. Like, in all honesty, a half a gram of pure maltodextrin, it's a healthy individual probably isn't going to see a lot going on. And most of the criticism is like, you realize we're talking about such a little amount. And people are like, yeah, but you didn't say it. That half a gram, it may not raise a healthy individual's blood sugar, but it may cause an insulin reaction in people who are trying to avoid having insulin reactions.
That's right.
The people who you talked about, prone to cravings or have allergies or other issues, having that information is really important. And coming from a food manufacturer standpoint, I find it unreasonable to suggest that a food manufacturer does not know that they have maltodextrin in their product. And I say that with a lot of confidence because of the information that is provided to us by our flavoring manufacturers. When we first started all of this, and we requested a couple of different flavors, way back in it was like 2017. And one of the flavors we requested was raspberry cheesecake. We just said, hey, we want a raspberry cheesecake flavor. They gave us some. I said, hey, yeah, this tastes great. Can I get there's a nutritional breakdown that lists all of the nutrients, and then there's an ingredient breakdown. Now, they don't tell you the specific aromatic compounds, like the actual chemical names. They always have this big salad of names for the different chemical compounds. And these are generally things coming from actual fruit. So I don't know that they're a big deal, those compounds, but they also give you a list of the stuff that was used to make that aromatic into a powder. And on the one that we got for that raspberry cheesecake, in the ingredient list, it listed dextrose, cornstarch, natural and artificial flavor, silicon dioxide, maltodextrin, propylene glycol, modified cornstarch, corn syrup solids, and soy lecithin. Legally, and we did not use that flavor. I just want to make absolutely sure that people aren't like, wow, that's what's in your stuff. No, we actually went back to them and said, we need one that is actually sugar-free, that uses acacia gum, and they were able to provide it without a problem.
Nice.
All of those ingredients, the dextrose, the cornstarch, the propylene glycol, modified cornstarch, corn syrup solids, as a food manufacturer, the FDA allows us to put on the label of the package natural flavor.
Yeah.
Or natural and artificial flavor. That is all that we are required to disclose. Now, we have more information, but we are not required to give out that information to people who are trying to watch the ingredients that they're taking in. Also, in the nutrition analysis of that particular one, they give you a breakdown by 100 grams. And I'm sorry if I'm getting into the weeds a little bit on this, but they give you here's your natural flavor, or natural and artificial flavor. In 100 grams, it has this much of stuff. And nice thing is that just becomes a percentage. So in that particular one, the one we didn't use, it has 223 milligrams of sodium. Cool. It has 77.9 grams or percent of total carbohydrate. But it also says on there that 53 grams of that is total sugar. So corn syrup, dextrose, maltodextrin. And the funny thing is, the maltodextrin doesn't actually show up in the sugar line. It's just the total carb minus dietary fiber. This particular one had no dietary fiber, so it was pure maltodextrin and sugars. So if we had used that product, we could have used it and put on our labels natural flavors, which is what a lot of companies do.
That's right.
And again, it's legal. It could be argued that it's ethical. But it's the reason why so many people get really excited about natural flavors and are upset at the food industry for hiding things from them. And the thing is, they don't have to. They don't have to hide that from people. They have the information. They just
choose to.
They aren't sharing it with people. And because of that, the number amounts that are on that nutrition breakdown, as a food manufacturer, I know exactly how much acacia gum or other carriers are in the flavoring. And I don't think it's even reasonable for me to say, oh, you know what? I actually messed up on the math on this.
Right.
I I can't accept that explanation
Yeah.
based on the information that I have.
Let me just say this.
Okay.
When I have different types of patients that come to my office, and most of my patients on the South Side of Chicago are not in the weeds. Thank you. First of all, thanks, Chris, for going into the weeds. I think people who come to this video are coming because they want to know a little bit about the weeds, right? So
Okay.
I think that's appropriate. Now, having said that, um, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a moment and
Ooh.
say, okay, so let me just say this first. My patients who come to me who are low carb keto carnivore find me from YouTube. They're very particular, and they're the ones who would get upset
Yeah.
about maltodextrin because they're like, dude, I'm trying to heal. I know
Yeah.
how to heal now, and I don't want anything sabotaging that. So I get why they would feel that way. Where some of my patients, they don't really care about it
Yeah.
like that. Now,
I
having
could have eaten cinnamon rolls instead of that
right,
maltodextrin,
exactly,
right?
right, exactly. Now check this. So here's the devil's advocate.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that basically natural ingredients is sometimes a place where you can hide your trade your secret ingredients, right?
Mhm.
So you could argue it's got to be reasonable to allow manufacturers to at least have a proprietary control over what you know, because otherwise it's the next gal can go down the street and make the same product. So how do we protect them in that way as well? Because that's a little bit of a devil's advocate question.
Yeah, so I've actually been going down that particular thing ever since all the controversy erupted, because we took the hard stance. My company, I know how important maltodextrin is to me personally.
Mhm.
When we're dealing with companies, they don't understand. They have
Mhm.
no idea why we are adding 20 or 30% to the cost of our product
Mhm.
just because we don't want to use maltodextrin. We
Right.
are apparently stupid. But I know how important it is to me. And so I want to make sure that people have as much information as possible.
Mhm.
Um, hold on, I just lost my train of thought here
That's
for a
okay. That's
second.
okay.
Yeah, your original question.
It was basically
Yeah.
trade secrets,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
natural ingredients, and what are we gonna do to
Yes.
protect the companies? Yes.
Yeah, so here's the big issue. Here's the why the FDA allows companies to do this. You can't copyright a recipe.
Mhm.
You can't patent a recipe.
Mm.
Um, I can look at what someone else is making and make an informed guess of what they're using and duplicate it. And if I can come up with the same flavor, I can copy a product without any issues at all. There
Mm.
is no legal recourse in that case. And so, because of that, things like the specific aromatic compounds, I know I sound like a broken record every time I say that, those are able to be considered a trade secret. It's the same reason why you can't get exactly Coca-Cola's recipe or
Right.
exactly the 11 herbs and spices used in KFC, whatever.
Right.
Those can be considered a trade secret and they are not required to divulge them. But I, as a manufacturer, do get the information as far as what was used to powder that. And so,
Mm.
like I was saying, since this whole thing has started, I've been contacting, just as a kind of anonymous person, contacting companies that sell electrolytes on Amazon and on their own website,
Mhm.
and just asking them what they use.
Mm.
And I even couch it with, I understand that you can't tell me the specific, here we go, aromatic compounds
Okay.
that are used in your flavor. I'm not looking for that information. I'm looking for what was used as the carrier to make your flavor into a powder.
Mm. Okay.
And almost without fail, the like 5 or 6 companies that I've talked to have come back and said, we can't tell you what's in our flavor. It's just natural flavor. I said, look, I know you can't tell me what's in your flavor. I'm asking the stuff that was used to make the flavor, because I know that you have this document from your flavor manufacturer that tells you what was used to make it. That's the information I'm looking for. Did you use acacia gum? Sometimes I'll even prompt them with that,
That's right.
because I've actually had 2 companies now that have come back and said, yes, we use acacia gum.
Mm.
All of the other ones just are like, no, we're not going to tell you.
Mm.
So as a consumer who is looking at this sort of stuff, it kind of defaults to the companies that know that this is a big deal
Mm-hmm.
are proud of the fact that they aren't using what everybody else uses.
That's right.
And so they're usually pretty vocal and pretty outspoken and quite proud, frankly, as they should be,
Mm-hmm.
that they have gone the extra mile and they care about you enough to use something else, and they're going to tell you about it.
Mm.
It
That's
is reasonable to assume everybody else is using maltodextrin.
that's right.
But here's the cool thing. I When this goes up, it's probably been out for a while, but Steve from Serious Keto, he's a YouTuber.
Mm-hmm.
He recently published a video where he demonstrates, and you might actually remember this from your chemistry class, demonstrates using iodine to show if something has maltodextrin in it.
Mm.
It's just a straight up assay. You mix the stuff into like a test tube or into a
Mm-hmm.
glass, and then you put a couple drops of not maltodextrin, I'm sorry, of iodine into it. And
Mm-hmm.
iodine is normally this nice orange brownish color. In the presence of maltodextrin, it almost instantly turns bluish purple. And so he actually did a video where he tested our product and it did not change color. He even took some of, because he's done some collaborations with us where he has actually created some flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And he has some of the pure, undiluted, straight flavoring.
Mm.
And he was able to test that as well. And boy, if I didn't know that it was going to pass the test, I would have been a lot more anxious than I
That's
was.
right.
But
That's right.
he put the drops in there, didn't change color. It was great. So as a consumer, yeah, we're coming back to assume that it has if it's a flavored powder,
Mm-hmm.
assume that it has maltodextrin unless they tell you otherwise. And if you really want to check it, you can always add a little bit of iodine to it. And if it changes color, it's got it.
That's sweet, and I appreciate Steve for doing that. I'll link that video to this video so that people can kind of enjoy that experiment as well. I think that's amazing, and it's nice to provide perspective. I think the point of this video is to create awareness,
Yeah.
and then you look at your own situation and say, am I a person who needs to really pay attention? And I think that's really going to be important. This is interesting because when you look at the carbs, and I'll show a label in a moment, but
Mhm.
you'll see the correlation between maltodextrin and the number of carbs is almost 1-to-1. It's not exactly that, but
Yeah.
the other part is this glycemic index. As you see, Chris, it's higher, meaning that the spike in your blood sugar from the maltodextrin will be higher than table sugar. And it's always a perplexing thing when you see a glycemic index of sugar being lower than 100. You would think it would be at 100 because it's
Yeah.
pure sugar, but it's a little less. And other types of sweet items are higher
Yeah.
than sugar. It kind of
It's because
throws people off.
it's got the fructose in there, which has to be processed by
Exactly.
your liver. So
That's
yeah.
right. And I appreciate that clarification. So let's look at. I just went online and randomly grabbed a label or two just to kind of
Okay.
see if it correlates. And this is one product that was maltodextrin. And as you can see, for
Oh,
a serving, right, it's kind of correlating. It's not 100 grams, which you see it for a serving at the top being 90. It's 94 carbs, but it's pretty close to 100. And even when we go to the next label, another product, and again, we're not trying to point out a product. We're just saying, okay, it says 14 grams at the top for a serving, a scoop, and it's 15 and 14, should I say. So you can see it's kind of correlating. So it's based, and what you said earlier, you say, you know what? It's about 500 milligrams for a serving of maybe the LMNT, and that's like basically a half a carb. And is that going to affect you? And that's really a question to be asked. Now, before we kind of move forward, I want to put in front of people this this concept of high glycemic index, because again, I assume people have never heard this stuff. But basically, the higher the glycemic index, the more the spike in the sugar. And if you have a high glycemic index substance like maltodextrin, you may have a harder time controlling your blood sugars. And that's really critical for my wife who has type 1 diabetes. And she depends on insulin. And I don't want anything spiking her blood sugar. Certainly, if it is, I want to be aware of it and know that it's going to happen. That's really the key. We need stable sugars because poor metabolic health, spiking every other day will then lead to all the potential complications. So I really think this matters.
Well, and like you were saying, the big issue isn't so much how much it's going to impact your blood sugar. It's that you are unaware
Right. Yeah.
that a specific product or different products that you may assume
That's right.
are safe for you and are the sort of thing that you want, and all of a sudden they're not.
That's right.
And I think that's the biggest problem that people have in this whole controversy.
That's right.
And a lot of people will naysay and like, well, there's hardly any carbs. And they're like, well, it shouldn't be any.
Right. Yeah, well, if that's what you're assuming you're purchasing, and let's be clear, it's an investment in yourself. And if you're going to make that investment, you want to get return on investment. So it's about trusting but verifying.
Yeah.
And that's what this video is helping you to do, is to say, what do I need to be thinking about? How do I approach this? And I think that's really important. So we mentioned digestive issues as things that can occur. And this image of this young man, if it were to show his hands is holding his stomach.
Oh, okay.
And he's in looks like a bathroom. And this was Dr. Hampton's life, man. Prior to low carb keto and now carnivore, I just hung out in the bathroom, and it wasn't fun being bloated, gassy, and having pain. And literally, I was seeking being able to get through, because first of all, if you're waking up at 2 a.m. to have these moments because of an irritable bowel, well, you got to wake up at like 5. So you're praying just in so I can get back to sleep. And then half the time you go lay back down, you got to get right back up. It's a horrible life. And it's a life I don't live anymore because of the dietary patterns I've adopted. Now, again, that's why I have to know what's in my food and in my supplements if I take supplements. Now, the gut microbiome of a keto person or a carnivore person is going to be a little different, right? Yeah. But if you want it, but think about it, your gut's different. Your microbiome doesn't have to be like a plant-based person. But what you don't want to do is disrupt the normal microbiome of a keto or carnivore person. And when you start adding things to that gut flora, you may then introduce the harmful bacteria that can harm you. And of course, we're doing all of this stuff to reduce inflammation, and we don't want to add something that could potentially cause inflammation. So any additional thoughts, Chris, here?
Well, I always talk about that if you are doing a low carb or ketogenic diet or any dietary intervention or lifestyle change, if you're allergic to nightshades, your lifestyle, your diet will not include tomatoes. And that may be something that's fine for other people. It also means that you don't get to make jalapeno poppers, which is really sad, and I feel bad for you. Anyway, because the things that are appropriate for one person may not be appropriate for another person. Right. And it really comes down to, I want people to be able to make choices for themselves, and I don't want to gatekeep their choices and say that, well, your concerns are irrelevant because they don't impact me.
Yeah.
And I mean, can't we all just, can't we just let everybody be happy and try to help
Mhm.
people out? And I realize that you can't make a product that works for everybody.
That's right.
I actually have a friend who his wife was bitten by one of those the ticks.
Yeah, the
Gave
tick.
her she has alpha gal sensitivity.
Mm.
She can no longer have beef.
Mm.
Like that's terrible. So is a carnivore diet perfect for her? Not with beef. It's not.
Right, that's
Um,
right.
so yeah, I
That's
want people to be able to make good informed choices about what's appropriate for themselves with as much information as they possibly can. And if I have the information, why not give it to them?
I know, right?
And
Yeah, we
if the information is uncomfortable for me as a food manufacturer, doesn't that say more about what I'm putting in there than what I should be putting on the label?
right, right. Yeah, it does. And it's just what kind of society do we wanna live in, right? I wanna live in a society where I can trust the manufacturer and that whatever's on the label is reflective of what's in the product. And when I'm learning my body and I figure out things and I understand things better, I need to trust that that knowledge can be easily translatable to what's on that label.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, like you said, there's enough people out there who will then still be able to use that product. My wife is keto. I'm carnivore. There's tons of things I can't tolerate that she tolerates, and she's allowed to eat the things she tolerates as long as it doesn't spike her blood sugar.
Okay.
And so we'll be sitting at the same table. I'll have a ribeye and she'll have a ribeye with asparagus. I
Okay.
don't want the asparagus. I don't want the Brussels sprouts because my body doesn't do well with those
Yeah.
things. So, man, so let's look at this. I just threw this in, Chris, because I work with a trainer now. Shout out to Carly, my
Nice.
trainer, who makes me accountable. And I know that if I exercise and I'm one of those people who tolerate maltodextrin, I may tolerate even more because I'm going to be using some of that maltodextrin as fuel.
Okay.
I also learned in researching this topic that you may be able to tolerate it better if you have consumed it after a workout for kind of because your body is just like a furnace, right? It
Oh
keeps
yeah.
burning. So you'll have a furnace going that'll keep burning. And then of course people who are not active should worry more about having this additive because they may not tolerate it as much as the next person. So I just threw that in. I just spent some when we went to the Metabolic Revolution rally. Mark Cucuzzello was there,
Mm,
and
he's so
he's
nice.
as the runner. I'm standing next to all of these legends, man. And Robert Lustig, Nina Teicholz, Dr. Georgia E, Chris Palmer, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. But they all came to this world with a different perspective, and I know for Dr. Mark, he was the guy that was running and doing that type of work. I just wanted to speak briefly about what we've kind of touched on, which is this labeling concerns, and we've talked about the importance of making sure people know what's in that natural
Mm,
flavors, even though I posed a question that would challenge it. And we just want to have transparency for everybody because if we don't trust the Chris's and the Miriams of the world with Keto Chow, then who can we trust? We want to be able to trust. Now, even there may come a time when the things that we know that's in there may become an issue. We never know because we're going to do
mhm.
research, but until that day, I want to be able to look back and say, you know what? Although there's an issue that just came up, they were fully disclosing what they were giving us, and now we can course correct whatever we have to do. But I just want to again live in a world where we can trust the people that are providing these supplements, and I
Yeah.
just think it's important.
Well, and I want to emphasize, I worry that I kind of came off as combative or attacking of these
Yeah,
other companies. I don't think this is malicious. I
right.
don't think that they are trying to hurt people or even necessarily hide things.
Mhm.
I think the team that I still personally consider Luis Villaseñor and Tyler Cartwright, if I can say it right, Tyler Cartwright to be friends, if not acquaintances of mine.
Mhm.
I have deep respect for them. I've never met Rob Wolf. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Mhm.
But I in no way can even in the slightest back parts of my mind think that Luis or Tyler would ever
Mhm.
have maltodextrin in the product that they created. I think it was more a question of they had this original formula and then it was given to the product making machine
Mhm.
that exists in the industry where you say, well, here's what I want. And they take it and they find flavors and they say, does this taste good? And you say, well, yeah, that's amazing. Let's
Right.
make this into a product.
That's right.
Okay, we ship it. And then you may find out other stuff down the line that
Mhm.
maybe, okay, there's an ingredient you don't want in there. Um, as far as disclosing ingredients that may be kind of controversial, a lot of and a lot of electrolyte supplements use citric acid.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you knew this, but citric acid is extremely controversial.
Mm.
We actually use malic acid instead because of the whole controversy. There's two ways you can get citric acid. You can either extract it from citrus peels, or you can take a glucose, starch, maltodextrin substrate, feed it through single-celled organisms,
Mhm.
and they make citric acid, pure citric acid. The problem is some of those single-celled organisms that they use are, for lack of better term, black mold.
Mm.
Is there
Mm.
black mold in it? I don't think so. Me personally, I don't think citric acid is that big of a deal. But you will see a lot of pushback on the internet with products that contain citric acid. And they'll say things like, well, where do you get your citric acid from? One company said, we get it from taro root.
Mm.
I investigated that. That means that they're taking taro root starch, making it into glucose, feeding it through the black mold, and making it just like everybody else. There's
Mhm.
no difference from
Right.
using corn syrup. So, yeah, there are a lot of companies that are disclosing some of these ingredients that are controversial, and they're getting a little heat for it. But
Mm.
yeah,
Wow. That's a mouthful, and
yeah, yeah,
at the end of the day, let's trust and let's disclose, and then we can go from there. Of course, these are not the actual products. This is AI, but I
yeah.
thought it was cute. And so we have SALTT, which is your company's electrolyte. We have LMNT, and then we have Gatorade. Now, the only point of this slide is to remind people you're in pretty good shape if you go with the first two
Oh yeah.
compared to, something like Gatorade. And Gatorade, as you can see from the carb count, has a ton of carbs.
Oh, so much,
Uh,
and
so
it's not
much.
very high in electrolytes either.
Exactly,
As an
and you're
electrolyte supplement, it's kind of terrible.
it's, like, horrible.
LMNT, element, whatever, however you want to say it. Um, I actually really like the product.
Mhm,
Um, in 2022, um, we were discussing with some friends about this whole maltodextrin thing because it was
mhm,
known at the time that Redmond's Relight and LMNT both contain maltodextrin. Of course, we thought there was a lot less maltodextrin at
mhm,
the time, but that's neither here nor there. And I was talking with one of my friends, and he's like, "Well, so why don't you just make your own without maltodextrin?" I'm like, "Well,
mhm.
maybe I will."
Right.
And it took a year, but I still think that Element is
Yeah,
a good product.
that's right, that's right. And I think that's important to message because even with this conversation, um, you can and we mentioned in a moment that they do have versions of it that doesn't have it in it, the maltodextrin anyway. So I
Yeah.
think, but compared to what you see over at the Walmart, at the if this is not your source of electrolyte, guys. So this is for
Uh,
that person who is new to this and saying, you know what, I'm not going to bother with salty or LMNT. I'm just going to go to get Gatorade. Do not do that because in fact, most of my patients take less than 30 carbs per day. and just one serving of Gatorade could potentially disrupt that goal. So I want to briefly, you mentioned Rob Wolf, and he wrote this article. And people who have seen other videos on this topic may have seen this, but I just want to put that in front of people before we, kind of look at a few more talking points. And you can see that he talked a little bit about the fact that even he had an issue with celiac disease, a little bit more serious than the irritable bowel I suffer from. But anyway, he knows with that type of condition, if you don't know what's in the supplements or food you're eating, you're going to have a problem. He suggested that LMNT has no gluten, no dairy, no soy, and eggs, etc. So he was just speaking to, hey, I care about this as well, and I want to speak to it. He also kind of defined natural flavors from his perspective and said, food flavors that originate from plants or animals. It can, the source material can be a spice, fruit juice, vegetable juice, edible yeast, and the other things that's listed here. So
love the bark one. That's awesome.
yeah,
he actually does a really good job explaining the difficulty in explaining what is in natural flavor, like the actual aromatic compounds. It's super hard.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just happy. And this is going back to what we were the messaging and the tone of this video is to share with you that they put this out. They're trying to speak to their customers. They're trying to speak to anybody that would question their integrity. And that's why I appreciate them putting this out. This is what they said about maltodextrin. And basically they are, because of the controversy that came up, they wanted to, first of all, let you know we hear you, and they wanted to remind you, as I mentioned a moment ago, that they do have a raw, unflavored version that does not have the maltodextrin. They also have the LMNT sparkling option for those who want. So they do have options. So if you're a consumer of their products and you're concerned, you can certainly use that instead. And I'm going to go to the really the thing that caught our attention. You already spoke to this, but again, Dr. Tro said they kind of put out there initially that it was 40 milligrams.
It was actually 4 originally.
Oh, it was only 4. Oh, wow.
It went from 4 to 400.
Oh, wow. So that was a huge jump. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
I think I remember that now. So that is a very good point. Thank you for that clarification. And that would really make somebody pause when they see that big discrepancy. And so this is what kind of led to the confusion. Now, my understanding also, Chris, is that their impression is that it was 4, and then they had an independent organization to check into it. And then they found that that's what led to this higher number that they had not heard originally. Is that, did you hear anything about that?
There's a lot of discussion as to who did the testing and why the testing was done. There's no indication that LMNT tested it themselves, or that someone else tested it and brought it to their attention.
Got you.
I based on the information that I know from our flavor manufacturers, I cannot accept that LMNT was unaware of the amount of maltodextrin that was in there. Now, it is entirely possible that the certificates of analysis that all flavor manufacturers provide and the nutrition information that all flavor manufacturers provide had erroneous information. It's also possible that the person who is in charge of taking that information and entering it into a database that they use to calculate their flavor labels, their product labels, that's what I'm looking for. It's possible that that particular person was keying in the information and literally moved the decimal by 3 spots.
Okay.
That's possible.
Yeah.
I find that a little unrealistic. I think it's more a question of they did not know or the people who knew didn't tell the people who were writing the articles on the website,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't tell the people who were in charge of customer service. I think there might have just been a breakdown in communication.
That's right.
Again, I don't think it was malicious. I don't think it was deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not out to get you.
Right. Right.
I think
Exactly.
there was just a breakdown in communication. But
Yes.
regardless of how it went down or who initiated the Inquisition, that's not the word I wanted to use, but whoever started that, they now have a better understanding of how much maltodextrin is in there. And that actually coincides with, if we were using maltodextrin instead of acacia gum in our flavors,
Mm-hmm.
it would have around 180 to around 600 milligrams of acacia gum, or in that case, maltodextrin.
That's right.
So that range fits with what I know about product manufacturing. So
That's
that actually
excellent.
looks pretty accurate.
And I'll just, I don't want to miss an opportunity to remind people what we talked about earlier, which is they're metabolically healthy people are probably, 1/10 of a teaspoon, right?
Mhm.
Is not gonna probably impact you, but it does impact people who are not metabolically healthy potentially. And
Yeah.
again, you can do your own tests, continuous glucose monitor, things like that, and check yourself. But for a sensitive stomach guy like myself,
Hmm.
who may or may not tolerate that, I need to know if there's, 0 out of 10% of a teaspoon. I just need to make sure that I know what's there so I can be in a better position to make my own decision.
Yep.
I just wanted to put this in front of people because we think about a gram of carbs but what's a milligram in comparison? So it's 1,000 milligrams versus 1 gram. So again, it's basically a half a carb if it's 500.
Yeah.
And I just want to put that in front of people, including this, to go back to doing a little math. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I want to get back to just me and you
Yeah.
chatting. And I do want to give us an opportunity to think about a few other uh, brief questions that may be on the minds of the people who are checking this out, and just make sure we touch on those brief points. So, and I think one of the things that really is important is your company's commitment to the low carb community. I don't, uh, you're probably, I'm not the best affiliate because I don't really advertise a lot when I do videos and stuff. I do have an
Okay.
affiliate link to Keto Chow, so that's my disclosure and bias. And I'll put that in the notes. But what I want to say is that one of the reasons why I had an affinity towards Keto Chow is because when I go to the conferences, I see that Keto Chow sponsors these conferences. Now, sponsorship is interesting concept, but part of what that means is that rather it's a smaller conference or a large one, particularly the smaller ones, in order for them to pay for these conferences, they really need companies to help support it. So I just want to thank you for that. But so that gave me a little faith in you guys anyway. But getting to know you and your wife has really been helpful. So I guess it's a trusted brand, Keto Chow. I want you to talk a little bit about, and we've touched on this, how Keto Chow kind of differs in terms of how you approach the quality of the ingredients.
Hmm.
What are you doing that should give people confidence that what you're putting out there can be trusted?
So, and this isn't unique to Keto Chow. This isn't unique to SALTT, but I make the products that I myself want.
Mm,
Um, we don't have like a market research division. We're a small company. We leverage using a co-manufacturer to do all the packaging and stuff, so that we don't have to wear hairnets and all that other stuff. But the Keto Chow meal replacement shake I created it for myself
mm.
because I still need help. with a ketogenic diet. I'm not at the end of my journey yet. And I needed something that was simple, that I could mix up, that actually tasted good,
Mm-hmm.
so that I didn't have to settle for going to Wendy's and getting 3 hamburger patties, because I didn't have the time to cook something amazing. Like
Mm-hmm.
on weekends, yeah, throw stuff in the smoker, go nuts. But on a regular day, when I'm leaving at 5 in the morning to go to work, I just don't have the time
That's
to
right. Yeah,
make something amazing.
that's right.
And there are people who will gatekeep that decision and say, well, then maybe you should just fast, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe you should do this, or look, I don't need that. Thank you very much for your concern. That's great. But I just wanted something that was simple, that was easy, that I could mix up. So I made Keto Chow.
Yeah.
Does everybody think that a shake is a great idea? My wife thought that I was crazy for making a shake company. She's like, shake companies? Yeah, that's the worst. Because most people's experience with a shake
Mm-hmm.
is, well, quite frankly, terrible. But here's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. If you put the person in charge of formulation, or they put themselves in charge, if they eat the thing, it's going to end up tasting really good. I
Mm-hmm.
actually, in 2019, I did an experiment on myself, um, where I only ate Keto Chow for 100 days, for 298 consecutive meals. I forgot to eat twice. Um, I had Keto Chow, and it worked out really well. I actually did it in part to prove that it was nutritionally complete, because I'm like,
That's
hey, it
right.
has all the vitamins and minerals you need. But also, I wanted to test what different fats do in isolation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does butter do compared to avocado oil or soybean oil?
Mm-hmm.
What do those do to the metabolic health of an individual? There's no good way to test that as a isolated variable. So I
Mm-hmm.
did that. Turns out butter is best, in case you're wondering. But then when we were looking at making an electrolyte supplement, I wanted something that I myself wanted. And that's really our guiding star, as far as when we're making a products that we ourselves use. And you see this in companies like Keto Brick.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Sykes, he wanted something himself and he made it. And other people are like, hey, I want that too. And I think when you're coming from a perspective of you yourself have this product that you're making for yourself, and you think the other people might be able to benefit from it. And I don't know all of the specifics of LMNT's genesis, of its history.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that I understand has me, I understand that Luis and Tyler, who are big into weight training and building muscle using a ketogenic diet, and they're very science focused.
Mm-hmm.
They're amazing individuals. I still remember a presentation I saw them do, talking about how lysine is the thing that either prevents muscle growth or allows muscle growth.
Wow. Crazy.
Amazing. Anyway, I think that they personally were using the formula of LMNT.
Right. Sure.
And stuff might have gotten away from it when they're not really involved in the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much involvement they have in the company. So much so that when everybody was saying LMNT has maltodextrin, Luis genuinely was like, no, it doesn't. What are you talking about?
Mm.
This thing that I made would never have maltodextrin.
Right. Wow.
Anyway, so I like to look for products that people, that the founders themselves are using it. I like to support small businesses. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
You can buy from us or not. I don't care, but I want people to be successful in their journey, in the decisions that they've made. I actually really am sad on a fundamental level when I see someone they've made a goal for themselves and they aren't following through on that. Whether
Right.
it's I'm going to stop smoking or I'm going to go vegan. of course, that makes me sad anyway. But if they're not sticking to their goals, that makes me kind of sad.
Yeah, it is. And it's, again, it's all about empowering people, being honest. If you make a mistake, you call it out because we're all human. And I
Hmm.
know a lot of people who's checking us out are gonna, you know, wanna, you know that you guys as a business are doing your best to help the customer. I know you have your YouTube channel and you're trying to educate, you're showing us different ways to use the product. What do you think are some of the ways you're empowering your customers
Mm.
to make informed decisions about what they're putting in their bodies, especially because I'll be honest, I was so excited about SALTT because I prefer capsules over liquid. And that was a great product that you guys came up with. And that's kind of what I use primarily. Not
Hmm.
every day, but I try to use it to prevent cramps and things like that. So what are you guys doing to help the customer who's
Yeah.
really trusting in you guys?
Well, we try to make sure that we're being as open and honest as we possibly can. It's actually, so I read the book Essentialism, great book,
Mhm,
and Atomic Habits, and this actually the stuff that's in them kind of mixes in my brain. And I can't remember which one is which,
mhm,
but I think it's in Essentialism. They want you to make a statement of central intent,
mm,
not so much a mission statement, but like this is what we believe in, and this is how we define success. And ours actually starts with that we are open and honest. Um, there are times when we're talking with, we're trying to come up with marketing ideas, and we have to remind ourselves that no, we are open and honest, and we are just going to tell people stuff how it is.
mm,
That actually came to a point a couple of years ago where one of the flavors of our product is they're savory soup flavors.
mhm,
And as part of the process of making those flavors, the company that makes them uses canola oil and soybean oil to lubricate the machinery.
mm, hmm, hmm, hmm,
And our flavor manufacturer had on the the ingredient declaration that that particular flavor had soybean oil and canola oil, or it might have them.
mm,
We chose not to just put natural flavors. We put soybean oil and canola oil
mhm,
on the nutrition panel or on the ingredients list. And we've actually phased that out. Now we use MCT oil on those
mhm,
particular oils and on those flavors instead. But a lot of people are like, why are you using
mhm.
soybean oil? Are you guys stupid? And we're like, well, we're not. But I would rather a person not buy my product because intellectually they're adverse to canola oil
Mhm.
than that someone who genuinely has a physical problem with it got the tiniest amount of soybean oil in the flavor from the manufacturing process, from the lubricated machinery.
Right.
I would prefer that
Yeah.
because that's a lot easier on my conscience, and I'd rather be as straightforward and as open as possible.
Mhm.
So that's what we do. It's also, you don't have to remember what you're not telling people if you just tell them everything.
Yeah, and you're right, it's hard to keep telling a lie. You'll forget what you told the first time.
And I don't think LMNT was telling a lie. I do
Right,
want to
that's
make
that's a
sure.
good
Yeah.
point, let's be clear, and again, if anybody, comes to my channel, they know I'm not the guy that's gonna, point and yell at people. No, we don't do that. In fact, um, I just recently had a vegetarian on my channel to lend her perspective, so I think we
Okay.
have to talk to each other, be respectful of each other, I assume the best of people, and that's why, as you have suggested, I assume that what was revealed was not malicious and intentional.
Mhm.
And I just think that that's the world I want to live in. a world where we're transparent and we can trust those who are in front of us and who are, making products that we want to consume. So as we kind of get to the wrap up, I would love to hear just your kind of global message you want to send to the world about this topic. And
Mhm.
I really do appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I just think that this video can just add to the conversation piece, but it's nice to hear this topic discussed through the lens of a person who's actually in this work doing it every day. And before you even give a global perspective, this is kind of the business side of me coming in. I recently was watching an influencer who talked about the E-Myth Revisited book.
Okay.
And this book is tells a story of a baker, and you're my baker in this story.
Okay.
All right. And this person just could kill a cake, right? Not the best topic for low carb, but it is what it is. And shout out to Maria Emery for making low carb options for us, right? You got to know it. And some of the
Yeah.
stuff you guys do. So you're a baker, you know how to bake. And but when you run a business, the book tells us you need to know that skill, but you also need to be a manager and you have to be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So you guys figured it out. Um, and I'm curious, the management and entrepreneur side of your story, how were you able to reconcile that? Was that reconciled through partnership and let somebody else do that? Or did you and Miriam have to become managers and entrepreneurs while being creators of these great products?
Yeah, I have a massive amount of imposter syndrome to start off with. I routinely sit there and go, these people think I know what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
yeah, we have had to really go outside of our comfort zone. Um,
Yeah.
we do have an amazing team. We've got a VP of marketing who does a great job of taking care of that team. One of the hardest things for me personally was giving up customer service
Mm.
because I was very passionate about that. I want people to have, I want to give people the experience that I want when I contact a company. And it's difficult to give that up to someone
Mhm.
else. Fortunately, we found a great team of people who are really, really passionate about it. The majority of the people who are in our customer service team actually do a ketogenic diet.
Mm.
Most of the rest of our team does not, and that's okay. But it's interesting. I think everybody has something that they're an expert in, and it's been really interesting this last couple weeks because I wasn't an expert in flavoring and product manufacturing, but I've gotten to a point where I kind of think that I am. Like
Mhm.
I talked to a guy a couple of years ago who he works in a plant where they take elemental zinc and turn it into products. And
Mm.
it was fascinating to talk to him about something that is so important to him
Mhm.
and get his perspective on that. Dr. Ballerstedt, I don't know, do you know Dr. Ballerstedt? So he,
Only superficially, yeah.
okay, he comes from the background of he worked for a seed company that would help teach ranchers and people who grow cows how to feed them more effectively.
Mhm.
And so for him, the terms grass fed and antibiotic free have a very different meaning than the popular myth that
Mhm.
it gets changed into when people talk about it. And his whole thing, Dr. Ballerstedt's whole thing was he comes from this one world and he hears people talking about grass fed beef and they have no idea what they're talking about. They're using
Mm.
terms that don't mean what they think it means.
Mhm.
And so he wanted to educate people that and help people understand more and kind of bring his low carb tribe and his meat production tribe together and have them actually talk competently. So for me, it's been interesting these last couple of weeks, all of this talk about natural flavor, which is something that I have a really good understanding of. And there have been quite a lot of misconceptions bandied about.
Right.
I'm really grateful for this opportunity to kind of talk about some of the realities behind why would someone even use maltodextrin? It's so
That's right.
dumb.
That's
Well,
right.
you just kind of do. How would someone not know? Well, they might have actually known, or there just might have been miscommunication.
That's right.
Anyway, yeah, it's it's been interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to live in this world. I had clinic the day of this recording on a Saturday. I had 18 people on my schedule, which is a lot for a Saturday morning.
Wow.
Ended up seeing maybe 16, but to be able to leave that world where I'm face to face with a patient who may have issues, and then to be able to see you at a conference where I get a chance to share my perspective and you get a chance to support the conference, and then get a chance to have a podcast where I meet people like yourself and others who allow me to pull the curtain back and to see the world in a way I never did. And it's such a privilege to be a doctor. It's such a privilege to be an influencer now. I guess I can call myself that.
Ooh.
Ooh, big time. And I am always humbled. And yes, I am also an imposter. I have imposter syndrome. And it's so funny because whenever I'm off script, I do just fine. But
Uh-huh.
I sometimes feel like I need a script, but the reality is the the lived experiences we have, rather it's how we've healed, you've healed in a different way than me, or just, knowing that in the right moment, the thing that you learned a month ago or 2 years ago will come back to serve the person that you're trying to convey a message to. So for me,
Mm.
as we kind of wrap up this video, I feel like it's a podcast, but we'll just call it. It's been long enough, right?
Yeah.
I just want to say to my audience that let's make sure that decisions we make are aligned with your personal goals, right? um for my wife is to avoid glucose spikes, right? So she'll make sure to eat food and consume products that align with that goal. So if it causes a spike, we're not going to do it. So if you're hearing this episode and you're looking for an alternative to maltodextrin, well, LMNT has that, but certainly Keto Chow has that. So you'll have alternatives, and that's kind of part of what we're trying to do today.
Yeah.
If you
Or
if
rather, SALTT does not have maltodextrin, neither does Keto Chow.
Right, exactly. So you don't have to worry about that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to
Oh,
articulate.
has that alternative. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm from a tough neighborhood, so if I didn't when it comes to the stomach, right?
Mhm.
Make sure for me, I need to eat products that don't mess up my stomach.
Yeah.
Or if I'm allergic to stuff, I need to have a product, the label that honors my allergies. And and then I may have to do my own research. Where did the maltodextrin come from? And,
Mhm.
and maybe the companies, if they're going to have that product, they need to say from what source. So I'll know if it's corn or whatever. If I have an issue with that, I'll know how to avoid that. And I just really think that the more important thing from a low carb perspective for a metabolic doc like myself, the thing that's going to push the envelope the most is just reducing the carbs. Let's be clear. We can talk about all of these weeds all day long, but if you reduce the carbs, you're going to be a happy camper and you're going to heal. And the last thing I'll say is that you need to trust but verify. So when you're making a decision, you don't just trust what I said, you don't trust what Chris said, Dr. Boz, Dr. Tro, Nick, whoever.
Mhm.
You trust but verify. You just use us as a tool to help you think about things you may not have thought about. So I'm really, again, privileged to have this conversation. I hope those who check this out will share this video so others will hear it. Let's have a conversation in the comments, or rather, what are you going to do? Are you gonna just go to a version of LMNT that doesn't have that? Are you not gonna worry about it because when you did your continuous glucose monitor, it didn't spike you and you don't care? Make your own decision, but just know that you now have more tools to make that decision. So, Chris, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming to my channel.
You're welcome.
Let's get this message out, and kiss your wife for me because I'm about to go kiss mine.
Okay, and let's go salt your meat. Yeah.
That's right. You better know it. Take care, buddy.
Okay, bye.